Dragon Ball Super Master Class, Draw Engine, or Draw Power. There's a lot of power in drawing cards, obviously. It's the whole strength in numbers thing, right? This is a numbers game, so it makes sense that, especially in a card game, for you to have a lot of cards, right? A lot of options. The more cards you draw, the more options you have. Some games, having a whole bunch of cards in your hand doesn't matter as much, but in this game, because combo power is a thing, so every time you draw a card, you're potentially drawing combo power, whether that you can use offensively or defensively. It makes draw power more relevant. Not saying that drawing cards in other card games ain't useful. Just saying that because most other card games don't have combo as a mechanic in their games, somebody could have 100 cards in their hands. That don't mean nothing if they're especially if they're tapped out. Like if it's an energy resource game, like Magic, for example. Magic doesn't have combo power, right? So if a Magic player taps out, then you can go off and do your wombo combo, right? Do your infinite loop and beat your opponent in a single turn. Just because they're tapped out, just because they don't have a way to interrupt because they have no energy to play anything. And there isn't that many free play stuff in Magic. Well, in standard Magic. In Legacy and Vintage, obviously, there's some free play stuff like Force of Will, but you get the point. In standard Magic, your opponent's tapped out. They're tapped out. Which means they pretty much have no response unless they have like a battle, a monster or enchantment or artifact or something on the field that lets them interact with your combo or interact with your board. You're more likely just gonna have free reign. So, and you're just gonna attack and do a lot of damage. If your strategy is an attack-based strategy, if your strategy is a burn strategy, then there's very little defense that they'll have against that. But yeah, drawing very good, right? Most of my decks don't have as much draw power as they used to, that they should have had, right? Because mainly I just focus on drawing the cards that I need, through mulligan, playing my cards in a specific order, right? I rely on my leader swing, especially if I have a leader that draws on the front side. I mainly rely on that. But if I'm playing a leader that doesn't draw on the front side, that is a weakness, a disadvantage, I should say, against a leader that does draw on the front side. So a leader that draws on the front side is going to have an advantage against a leader that doesn't, right? So that becomes a problem. So we try to make up for that by using unisons, specifically 2-drop unisons with +1 draw effects. I used to play, when unisons first came out, was the 2-drop Go Tanks. I think it was like Super Saiyan 3 Go Tanks or something like that. And he had the ability to draw a card. The thing is, he didn't +1. He didn't gain a marker. He didn't even lose a marker. He just let you draw a card for free. The problem is that since you're not gaining any markers, him getting double striked or getting attacked twice and getting off the board was very common. So at most you drew 1 card off of him. Now with the newer versions where you +1, you get the potential to draw 2, maybe 3 cards before your opponent manages to take your unison down. So you at least get at least 2 to 3 cards out of it. So that definitely changed things in drastic ways. So then of course if your leader draws on the front side and you play a unison, you're drawing 2 cards a turn. So it's twice the advantage, right? If you play a battle card that also lets you draw, you could potentially draw 3 cards a turn. So you get the idea. So Shenron Figure of Majesty, I always considered a planeswalker, the original, unison in a way. Just the way I played it and the way I was promoting it back then, when I was putting in a lot of decks and talking about it, was that essentially it's the planeswalker of my decks. I mainly used it for, well, obviously you draw a card, so it was a draw engine, but also as a resource engine, right? Because of by resource is a recursion engine, is what I meant to say. Recursion engine because of the fact that I can bring back a 2-drop or less from my drop area onto the field, preferably a blocker that draws a card and is a blocker, obviously, right? So that I can have a reusable defense that keeps my hand size nice and thick, which further increases my defense, right? And my offensive and defensive options. Stopped using it for a long while just because of turn 4. I wanted to save it for other plays, other things like that. So I didn't, I just focus more on the idea that by the time I get to turn 4, my opponent's already low at life. I should be focusing on going for game as opposed to playing a 4-drop, Shenron, right? Instead of dropping Shenron to try to get some recursion out of it, instead of turn 4 engine, right? I should be going for a turn 4 win, a turn 4 kill. So then that's part of what caused me to stop playing it for a long while. But I'm getting back into playing it again because one, it does help you get into later games, later turns, I should say, into later turns, which in certain games is important. There's the aspect that the way I'm using it now, other than it being a draw engine like it was before, right? Now it's it's part of it's a draw engine, but also it's a ramp engine, so to speak, because of the energy untapping. So pretty much by using it in all my decks, it essentially turns my decks into like Soul Striker, essentially. So that's the game theory behind Shenron Figure Majesty. It's not that hard to get 5 cards in a drop, especially if you're going up against a mill deck. Then you can use this to obviously gain advantage, free advantage, right? Bring back any 2-drop or less from your drop every turn, especially if you're going up against, like I said, a mill deck, like Cooler Mill or something like that. Or you just play a deck where you burst and you mill, and you can take advantage of this, bringing back some stuff from the drop. Plus, keeping your hand size nice and thick by drawing every turn along with your leader and a unison. So if you have a leader, a unison, and this card out in play, you could potentially draw 3 cards a turn. If your leader draws 2 cards a turn, then you're potentially drawing 4 cards a turn, right? And that's not including the fact that you'll draw for your turn, right? When you draw for your draw phase. At some point, you'll stop charging energy. Typically, at most, you'll probably charge 6 energy at most with most decks. Some decks can stop charging after turn 4, but some decks, charge all the way up to turn 6. Sometimes turn 8. You get the idea. But the point is, at some point, you're going to stop charging, which means every time you draw for your turn, you're just going to keep that. That's just going to be advantage. And then your leader will draw, then your unison will draw, and then Shenron will draw. So the potential of drawing 4 to 5 cards every turn, it's pretty high. It's definitely something you want, because you definitely want to take advantage of it and use it. Use that constant 5 cards a turn or 4 to 5 cards a turn advantage, and use it against your opponent, especially if they don't draw that much. If they draw 1 or 2 cards a turn, you drawing 3 to 5 cards a turn is gonna give you a huge advantage, whether you're good at the game or not, right? Whether you're skillful or not, strength in numbers, right? That's the whole point. It's the quantity over quality. I'm more of a quality over quantity type of player. That's why I try to focus on like 1 card win cons and that kind of stuff. Make sure that I deliberately play cards for specific outcomes, specific reasons, but drawing a whole bunch of cards and making the most of it, and just taking advantage of the fact that you have more cards than your opponent. Not saying that it's a bad strategy or anything like that. Just saying that it's no different than spawn camping, right? It's no different than just camping out and just getting free W's left and right by barely doing anything. So, I'm not saying it's a bad strategy. or it's a strategy people shouldn't use. I'm just saying that it is, it is a simple strategy. It's not rocket science, is what I'm trying to say. So obviously, ironically, right, I am trying to incorporate into decks. I already incorporated a lot of other stuff into decks already, if y'all been watching my videos. But now, I want to bring back draw power, right? So that's what, I'm making this video, to bring back draw power, right? And this is one way you can, besides the unison, obviously, if you've seen most of my decks, you already see that a lot of my unisons have draw effects on top of whatever extra effect they have. And that helps me against hand control, outdrawing my opponent, to reduce the possibility of them reducing my hand size to 0 and taking full advantage of me being defenseless, right, by not having any cards. So having stuff that lets me draw helps me counter hand control, or at least just make sure that I don't lose card advantage, right? I don't run out of resources, is what I'm saying. Just as long as I don't run out of resources, I can play the game. Can't play the game without cards, right? So that's why card power, draw power, matters in that regards. You don't want to run out of cards to play. But you don't want to do draw greed, right? You don't want to get greedy and draw a whole bunch of cards, because you could lose by decking out. And, you're not trying to lose, so be careful. The point is not to be too greedy. And nothing wrong with drawing a whole bunch of cards, just try not to draw too much, because that could create a problem for you. Drawing a whole bunch of cards, inherently creates a problem for your opponent, but you don't want it to also create a problem for you. But you better have. It's better to have and not need than to need and not have, right? So it's better to have the ability to draw a whole bunch of cards and not really need to do it, than to really need to do it but can't do it at all, right? You don't want to be in that scenario where you really need draw power and don't have it. So you want to try to incorporate, whether you tech in 1 or 2 copies of Shenron Figure Majesty, teach their own. Whether you side deck it or main deck is up to you, but I'm definitely, been main decking it. Part of it is for the draw, obviously. That's one of the selling points for me is to use it as a draw engine. But it's the energy untapping thing. The way I look at him now compared to some of the stuff we have now, is that I see him as a generic version of, what's his name, Majin Buu Unison, Agent of, Assault of the Agents, the Majin Buu Unison, or the Buu Unison, right? He has the ability to let you draw a card and untap one energy. I think one blue energy, right? Just one energy. I think it's just one energy in general. If you have a mono blue leader, but if you're using that unison in a deck where the leader isn't blue, then you don't get the energy untapping ability. You will get the draw and untapping the unison effect, but you won't get the untapping energy ability. This will make up for it, because you could play this the turn. Sorry, you could play this the turn after you play the blue unison, and then now you can draw 2 cards a turn, untap 2 energy, and have a sword and shield, right? A 20k double strike blocker you can use every turn, and that's an advantage right there you can take advantage of. So making sure you always have 2 energy untapped, is very powerful. This is why Soul Striker matters, because think about it, if you take Soul Striker's ability to untap energy away, would he be considered the best blue leader? No, he's only the best blue leader because he untaps energy. We literally have Shenron Figure Majesty. It's a 4-drop that can untap 2 energy just by having 5 or more cards in a drop, and you draw a card. This is something you can do without attacking. And you could play this with any leader. What's his name? Hatchak, obviously, right? That's one of the decks I definitely immediately started putting him back. One of the reasons I wanted, to use Shenron was to bring him back. It's like, let me bring him back into Hatchak. It's been a long time since I used him in Hatch. So I'm bringing him back. Especially he works great for the idea that if I play blue Hatch, red Hatch, or whatnot, since I won't be awakening the leader, and I don't want to keep doing the leader's front side effect where I bottom leader a card, then mill a card, then draw a card. So I'm losing 3 cards every time just to try to draw. I'd rather use Shenron Figure Majesty and just draw a card every turn. And untap energy, or just play something from the drop over and over again, like a blocker or something, especially if the blocker can draw a card. So it's like I'd rather just get back into that. So the main thing I want to do with Shenron is ideally play it on turn 4, right? And untap 2 energy, so I can, play Topo, Oceanus, my negates and stuff, just so I can keep my defenses up. The idea is to set them up so that we turn 5, I can use them to do some wombo combo. Plus, I got some combos and some lines of plays where untapping 2 energy would come in handy. So imagine combining that with Senzu Bean and combining it with a leader's Awaken ability to untap 2 energy. All right, you'll get so much energy out of that. So, like I said, I'm using it as a form of obviously draw power, but also as a ramp engine. So that way, when I tap out to do some stuff, some herper derp, right, I can use Shenron and untap my energy and have the energy to make more plays, or use it for defense. Because, like I said, you always want to keep your defenses up and you don't want to be tapped out. And sometimes you got to tap out, especially if you're going to play like your turn 5 win con. Like, let's say you're going to play a 5 drop on turn 5 and you're trying to use it to win the game, but you might end up in a situation where you don't, even though you should, right? If it's a win con, it should definitely win you the game, right? But in the event that it doesn't win you the game, you can at least untap 2 energy with Shenron and make up for that situation. Obviously, you don't want to fall into a Godzillion Trunks. Obviously, if you have a win con, it should obviously have deflect and barrier built in, or at least it should at least be a unison as a win con. That's one of the things I'm leaning towards more, using unisons as finishers and leaders as opposed to battle cards, since it's harder for my opponent to counter or interact with leaders and unisons. I might as well use them as finishers more often than not. And to support them, or to support any other strategy that I'm trying to do, that's where Shenron Figure Majesty comes in. So it's just some more, next level plays and thinking that I'm doing. Like I said, it essentially turns any deck that I'm playing into essentially Soul Striker. And that's considered the best leader, right? That's considered the best. Right now we got Gamma 1 and 2, and they're untapping 3 energy at the end of every turn. So imagine if you were playing any blue leader, regardless of what blue leader you're playing, right? And then you throw in the Majin Buu Unison, obviously. That lets you untap 1 energy, so that's kind of like Soul Striker, right? But then you throw in Shenron on top of that. So now you're drawing 2 cards. Well, technically 3, because your leader should draw a card, obviously, right? So you're drawing 3 cards a turn and untapping 3 energy a turn. So then it makes your decks basically a lot like Gamma. Ironically, if I'm right, you should be able to play the Buu Unison, right? And Shenron Figure Majesty in Gamma, right? And then you should be able to untap 6 energy, right? 3 for the leader. You're swapping out, and then you're untapping 1 for the Majin Buu Unison and 2 for Shenron Figure Majesty. So any point in time you have 6 energy, you're obviously able to make some big plays where you could just pay 6, play something really big, and then just untap all 6 energy just because you have Shenron Figure Majesty, the Majin Buu Unison, and you're playing Gamma 1 and 2. So there should be like a really good 6 drop you might be able to play in Gamma 1 and 2. I don't know the full restrictions of Gamma 1 and 2, what you can and can't play, but I'm just assuming that you can do this with that. But in general, if you're playing Super Saiyan 3 Goku, right? Goku already untaps 3, and then you have Shenron and the Unison untapping 3 more. That's 6 energy untap every turn. So that's busted. So that opens up the possibility of playing multiple, floodgate negates, there's a lot that could be done. But not just that, you also, since like I said, you're drawing for the Unison, you're drawing for the Shenron, and you draw for the leader, right? So that's 3 cards a turn, plus you're, drawing for your draw phase. And if you don't charge, then that's just an extra card in your hand. So that's 4 cards a turn, and you have a lot of energy, right? And you have a lot of cards to play, and that's just the benefits of blue, right? So Shenron and blue definitely busted. But if you're playing red, right, then Shenron is just a untap 2 energy unless you have the leader ability to untap 2 energy. Then that's 4 energy you can untap, which can let you make other plays. And the funny thing is you can use the 4 energy that you untap, right, on your turn to play another Shenron Figure Majesty, draw another card, and untap 2 more energy. That way you still have energy for defense, but now you plus some extra cards in your hands, and now every turn after that, you're plussing 2 cards and potentially untapping 4 energy every turn. So you see the potential of, how busted this card can be, draw power wise, but not only that, resource wise, because it lets you literally untap. And then, if you tech in Senzu Bean, right, even more energy untapping, even more busted plays, especially if you're, untapping energy on your opponent's turn after you already untapped it on your turn. So you just too busted. Just wanted to put that out there, and definitely, just want to let people know that if you're playing red, yellow, green, right, black, you should definitely consider Shenron Figure of Majesty as something you might want to test out and see the potential in there, especially if you're having trouble with the blue matchup. A lot of people like saying that blue matchup, like, oh, the blue matchup is tough. Blue matchup is tough. Game on 1 and 2 is the deck to beat now. It's the deck to beat now. It's like, okay, one way you could beat it is by joining it, right? Match them, right? Fighting fire with fire. I'm not largely supportive of fighting fire with fire, but ironically, in a fighting game, it does work. Fighting fire with fire. More often than not, right? Sometimes fighting with water with fire is better, right? But there is sometimes where it's like, okay, the best way to outperform another deck is to do what the deck does, but do it better, right? Or at least do it just as often. So, it's the whole, if you can't beat them, join them, right? Copy them, do what they do, and hopefully you're better at it than they are. Like, I've had a match against somebody who was like playing Drip Coup, and they admitted how hard they were struggling to play against me with me using unisons, because they weren't used to other players using unisons like I use them, or using them a lot or even at all, right? But definitely not using them a lot. Like, he wasn't used to, well, the way I call it is unison master. He wasn't used to playing against a unison master, right? A master of unisons. It's like, yeah, I've been playing unisons for a long time since they came out, and I've been playing a lot of them. And I play almost all my unisons in a single game. So, yeah, that's gonna throw some people off if they're not used to that. But that's the whole point. You always want to be different and stand out and do what others aren't doing, or do what others are doing but do it better, right? There's such thing. You can reinvent the wheel, as they say, right? You can reinvent the wheel. So hopefully this is helpful. I mean, it's definitely helpful for me. I'm definitely been enjoying the power that Shenron has, gives to my decks, especially when you combine it with unisons. Chef's kiss. Mwah. Perfection. And that's the end of the video.